So I'm just pressing record.
This meeting is being recorded.
So for today's presentation, I'm happy to introduce two representatives from Forêt Capital Forest, Shelley Lambert and Stephanie McNeely, directors of the organization, an Ottawa-based organization that is dedicated, so I'm just letting person in, okay, that is dedicated to increasing the canopy and biological diversity of lands in the National Capital Region. Today, they are here to talk about a demonstration site they have in Ottawa where they engage the public on the many benefits of trees and forests. The presentation will be 20 minutes or so, and then there'll be time for Q&A. As the host of today's session, I will moderate the questions, but if anyone participating today has questions themselves, feel free to put them in the chat, or else following the presentation, you can unmute and ask the question directly. Finally, I'd like to mention that this webinar series and all of SOL's programs are made possible by the generous and ongoing support of Gaia College. And if you're out there and you're interested in taking courses or a diploma in organic land care, if you haven't checked out Gaia College, I encourage you to do so. So thank you, and over to you, Stephanie and Shelley.
Well, thank you very much for having us on this very, very hot July day in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. My name is Shelley Lambert, and my talented co-director is joining us as well. Stephanie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Stephanie McNeely. I'm one of the directors of Forêt Capital, and we're very excited to be here today.
And I'm going to get us started just to introduce a little bit. If people have seen the Greenspaces website, this is the image and the blurb about what we're doing in Blackburn Hamlet. And we'll walk through a little bit about what our goals are and the activities that we're undertaking during this year are, what's already happened, and then looking forward what we hope to achieve over the course of the next little while on this property in the city of Ottawa. So a quick description of the site. It's located in Blackburn Hamlet at the Just Food Community Farm. So it's an NCC property under a long-term lease, and we have a relationship with Just Food, a nonprofit at that site. We are tending to a lot of the land at that site. So originally it was divided into two sections, one called the Just Food Community Food Forest, and one was the Forêt Capital Forest base of operations. But we've decided, because they're right beside each other, to merge them into one unified site that we steward. And the intention is to link them via a walking path with interpretive signage. And the property itself is approximately 9 acres. So where is this in terms of the National Capital Region? It's within 10 kilometers from Parliament, and the exact address is 2391 Pepin Court. The site itself, just so we know how to speak about it, we break it up logically into field 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4+. So the activities right now have been kind of focused on field 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to talk through what some of those have been. And I will say, if you're visiting the site and it is open to visit, we keep it purposefully wild. And there's a few reasons why we do that, but we can get into it. It'll show well the wildness in some of the photos that are here as part of the presentation. And I will also add that you can see, based on this kind of high-level map, there are existing trees there, and we of course aren't removing trees to make room for food forest type trees. We're designing around the existing tree base because why would we take out trees when they're just lovely and already making their way into their full form. So the first two fields of that diagram, that's essentially the original plant was Just Food Community Food Forest. And it's still considered a young food forest. It has several hundred trees, shrubs, forbs planted into it. And we've been kind of, even before Forêt Capital Forest, the nonprofit that we are directors of, existed, some of these trees had been planted into that site. There are several small pathways that let you walk along what have been loosely named little pathways, Apple Alley, Berry Lane, and you can kind of guess what's planted along those pathways based on the name. There's a nut grove where we have hickory trees and walnut trees. So those trees, we know they will grow quite large over time, are spaced out a little bit more than some of the other trees. The intention is also to have a space for people. So there's a seating area under a grape arbor. And the other point about this forest is not just planting more trees or having trees that can produce food, but also to have a very diverse set of species in the site so that we can use those species to take cuttings and propagate more of that same kind, stuff that's harder to find in local nurseries. And of course, all of this a labor of love from the volunteers that have helped put this together. So that field one, you'll probably recognize from the Greenspaces website, but also there's a red barn in the background of many of the pictures of that site. So we often call it the Red Barn Food Forest. And the planting of that began in 2018. And it features those narrow pathways, the grape arbor, the picnic tables. And in a lot of this site, and especially over the 9 acres that we have, it's a very heavy clay soil. It suffers from not being well drained. We work on helping improve the soil at all of the fields, but we're trying different methods. So in field 1, there are many hugelkultur mounds, which is essentially a compost pile with soil on top that you plant into. And by that, I'm being very glib. It's not just compost pile, it's logs and branches and then other kinds of debris laid down to break down slowly over time. This actually really helps hold water for trees, so we don't have to irrigate this. It helps create little microclimates between mounds, because when things decay and break down, they're generating heat, so you can extend the season. And of course, it also provides us with more planting area, because if you have a flat plate of planting, you have a certain square footage, but if you start to grow things and create vertical space or plant on hills and create kind of a fold in the soil, you have created more planting surface. So we're actually taking the 9 acres and making more planting area by having uneven ground. So this is a very, I think this is from a couple years ago. This is looking towards the in progress build of the grape arbor and down what we now call Apple Alley. For the choices here, we're choosing apple varieties that are very uncommon, some of them very rare. They're pick of apples for fresh eating and for cider. And now that they're 4 years old, they're starting to, some of the trees are starting to produce quite a few apples. They seem to be very happy here. We're going to continue to expand the collection out. And because of that, and now we're going to be hitting a maturity window of apples over the course, or really all fruit trees over the course of time. We're collaborating with other organizations on things like community cider pressing equipment, with the idea to follow the Scandinavian model, where people could even bring apples in from their homes for pressing weekends. Everyone brings apples, it all goes into the grinder, and everyone goes away with some fresh apple cider from that. Again, still onto this field 1, the work in progress of building this tall arbor. You can see at the start of any given season, there's a lot of wild flowers and a lot of possibly too many unwanted things. For the most part, we do leave them in place, but we have this big open circle that we try to keep down and mowed to invite people to come in. And as we build the walking path here, access from this road back here, we want these circles to be accessible to anyone. So we need to make sure it's open and flat. And we're going to be making sure that at least the seating areas are fully accessible. It may not be feasible for the entire walking path to be that way, but we definitely want people to be able to come and enjoy these seating areas. As we move into field 2, we have a really exciting set of plots that we've built. We've started the planting this spring, and these are demonstration plots to say, what is the average lawn size or yard size in Ottawa? And could we create 4 yards that instead of growing a lawn on them, we create tree guilds and grow fruit trees and shrubs and perennials on them. So this planting, the soil prep for this was a lasagna method. So layering, blocking out the very aggressive grass that's out in this field with cardboard, laying down leaf mulch and compost and then soil, and then planting into that. And those, this is the first day of that work, or the first planting day of that work on May 2nd of 2022. I don't unfortunately have a today picture of that, but now these are fully planted out and partially mulched. So we will continue to work on these in this fall to finish the work. And then it's a matter of kind of keeping it tidy. So these are meant to be kind of the, if you're fussy about what a food forest looks like, these are the well-maintained, curated ones that you could envision seeing in your yard in an urban setting. So these will have a little bit more weeding and attending to than any other part of this site, because we want people to come here, tour the site, see these and go, I could imagine my front yard or backyard being this instead of what it is if it happens to be lawn. All right, so as we move into field 3 and 4, what is really the Forêt Capital Forest base of operations, we really have only begun the work on those 2 fields last year, and we had our AGM looking out into, essentially, I'll share a picture, what we call the field of dreams, not having started anything. And what we hope is, as people visit these sites each year, they see that it's, improving iteratively over time. But it was important to us to invite lots of people to that first AGM and say, we want you to see it now, because we want you to have that experience of excitement when you see it as it gets grown up into food forest and pathways and a place where people will want to come and bring their friends. So the intentions here are really to help us build capacity. And by that, I mean, we have a kind of a very high set of goals of afforesting 1,000 hectares around the National Capital Region over the next few years. If you have that kind of goal, that means you have to have access to healthy native indigenous tree species. There aren't enough supply right now by local nurseries. So we are creating a tree hub here where we can grow up some of our own from seed, and a seedling structure. We have I'll talk a bit more about it later, but we're helping train up a tree seed collection team. So they're certified collectors that can help bring groups out and collect more local tree seed so we can keep up with the amount of supply that we're going to need to meet our goals. But of course, at these fields too, the intention is we want to inspire, motivate, and learn. So we have some demonstration plots here as well, trialing the Miyawaki method to create tiny forests, to see varying them slightly in our land prep, our soil prep, to see does it make a difference. So it's kind of an exciting time for us right now. We're partway through that work, but this gives you a sense of what we started with. So we had cover cropped with buckwheat to try to stop the growth of the active, aggressive growth of unwanted grass here. This is what it looked like when we kind of plowed down the buckwheat. That was there really to also help lighten the soil a bit since it's heavy clay. And as part of that capacity building work, part of the field 3 will become the community tree hub, where we'll put small tree saplings that we rescue from other sites and seedlings that we grow up from seed, so that we can build our own supply, especially of tree type species that are a little harder to find from local nurseries. And by the way, I'm just filibustering right through this. If anyone has questions, please make sure to put them into the channel. The capacity building on site as well, that growing trees from seed. We are building a seedling structure that's going to be an outdoor fenced in structure to keep all the little critters away from some of these. But we also have access to a small greenhouse on site. And this year we did use them to start several hundred trees from seed as our kind of experiment or first try at this, and it was quite successful. So we're looking forward to next year. So that field 4 was where we started the work on the tiny forest demonstration plots. And you can see the site prep for this. We had no plans to do this by hand, given that the Miyawaki method kind of describes the soil prep as being pretty rigorous. So thanks again to Stephanie's brother for being our operator here. What we did work into the soil here, and we've broken it kind of out into 2 parts. The first half of the plot is worked amendments into the soil down to 3 feet. And the second half, we worked it only down to 1 foot to see, is there going to be a difference in how these 2 different types of site preps work for us. So as these tiny forests grow up, will we notice any difference? And what got worked into this is possibly the heaviest clay I've ever worked with in my life. It's almost like a blue clay. When it dries out, it is like brick. So we worked in a lot of leaf mulch, straw, and compost, and some minerals and some mycelial inoculant to prep this area. And the idea here is that we're making the Miyawaki method. It is important to do this land prep because we're trying to mimic a 100-year-old forest floor. Because if we can mimic a 100-year-old forest floor, we can maybe arrive at a 100-year-old forest sooner than if we didn't do some of this prep. And then this shows a bit of the planting. You can see in this picture what it looked like after the prep. And then this is, we're now a little farther along even than this picture here. But you'll notice it is a very dense planting as well. And this is part of the Miyawaki method. 3 to 5 things per square meter, with the idea that they will compete with each other. So we decided it's a forb, a shrub, and a tree per square meter. We could have gone for an extra couple things in that 1 square. But the idea is the forbs established early, those perennials. The shrubs also are early and established fairly quickly, but everything is shooting up towards the light. So they're growing a little faster than normal. And if you read about tiny forests and Miyawaki method, the hope is that you could achieve 100-year-old forest in 10 years. Now we're going to find out as we watch this thing grow, if that's really accurate or if it's just a nice way to get a faster growth and a rapid afforestation. You can also see that we've already built the walking path through these sites. The idea, and hopefully over the course of the next few years, one will still be able to pass through here. And there is a very small seating areas in each one of the sections. And what we're hoping is you'll have an experience of being enveloped in these tiny forests, having a quiet seating area for two and just being able to absorb the sound of the forest in a small way. So that leads us into a little bit more of this work in progress, walking path and interpretive signage piece. So tying all those fields together with a big, long, meandering path that has several different routes through it, where people could say, I only have half an hour, and they could look at a map and say, oh, I could take this route through it. We are building the paths with the idea that there would be berries along several parts of this long, windy path. So there are foraging opportunities if you hit it at the right season. And the idea that there will be bigger main artery path and a lot of secondary paths. So if it's a large group visiting or a big family visiting, they can take the main artery. If it's an individual or a couple of people wanting to explore some of the off territory parts of the 9 acres, they would have paths that they could take. And you could come many times and enjoy many different walks through this site. So this is the proposed main artery. And I say proposed, there's lots of this that already exists, but not as wide as we will need to make it. So the intent is that it would be 6 to 8 feet wide, be able to accommodate tours and groups. And then the secondary paths, which aren't shown here right now, would be the smaller 2 to 4 foot wide paths for little excursions off the main path. And I guess the question then is, well, why are we doing this work? One, I guess, to develop the base of operations, to capacity build so that we are able to supply ourselves with native species of trees to take to some of the other sites where we plant trees in a forest. Also to give these demonstration sites. So the hope is that many people will come walking these paths and tour the site and get inspired or motivated if they have small pieces of land and small spaces themselves, and they want to start putting some trees in or changing the space in a positive way. But also to increase the biodiversity and the tree canopy in the city. And really of great interest to me is all aspects of a healthy forest system. So engaging with universities and research to look at healthy forest floors, including soil and the mycelial interactions and the microorganisms that live in our forests, and what are things that we could be doing to give forests a better chance of survival as we plant them out. And I probably should stop. I for a moment pause, ask if people had questions, because these kind of next few slides are telling a little bit about who we are and then our goals for the future. And I might invite Stephanie to say a few words as well. I know you haven't had a chance to see the last couple of slides, but I think you know what they're about to say.
I always like to take the opportunity to invite people to check out our website and to see if volunteering with our organization is something you might be interested in. So I've posted the link in the chat. We tend to attract people who are interested in getting their hands dirty. So if that's something you like, there's plenty of that. It really is rewarding to see what you plant, to watch it grow. And we really feel like our organization is conducive to being replicated in other places. So Shelley has mentioned the community tree hub idea. And if we follow the, I think it is a Scandinavian model, and where those have been implemented, you know, we could have a few of these across the city. And certainly if we start dreaming big, that's what we would see is, you know, there's a construction project happening in your neighborhood, a bunch of little trees might get bulldozed. Well, we'd have a spot for those to be rescued to and cared for. Other places where we're planting trees, the NCC is quite fond of our models. So we need people to help water there. So we're just looking at, you know, creating these tree hubs, engaging people to steward the trees we're growing, and for everyone to get involved in increasing our tree canopy. There certainly has been a lot of press this week on heat island effect and increasing number of days of extreme heat as climate change increases. So we feel this is really, it's tree planting 2.0. It's got the food aspect. And I've got to say, over the 2.5 years I've known Shelley, I have learned so much and been able to experiment so much with my own food planting and techniques in the hugel culture. So if that's something that interests you, this site is really amazing to come walk. And as Shelley says, it's going to keep evolving. It started as a field of dreams with some ideas and a loose sketch. And some of that is now starting to land. And it's like anything else, we're as strong as the group of people that come help us and work with us. So the link is there. Go explore. There's a volunteer intake sheet, and come see what we're doing. Come visit us in Blackburn Hamlet.
Right. And then I guess the other note, thanks, Stephanie, is the other note being, this isn't the only site that we're working, because it is on the Just Food Community Farm. We have the theme of food-bearing trees at this site, but a lot of the other lands that we're planting into are their National Capital Commission managed lands. And for those, the focus is a lot of native species suited to those specific sites. If they happen to be along a creek bed, there are trees that can handle a little flooding. They can handle having their feet wet. But working with the forestry team from NCC and making a plan. And we are lucky that we have a lot of wonderful people, and including Professor Kenny, a retired forestry professor, giving us some of the guidance that helps us make those selections and plans. But certainly we want to also build relationships and work with other key landowners around the region to kind of achieve the shared goal of increasing the canopy. We know that is a goal for the NCC, and it's certainly likely a goal for many other landowners to say, you know, I don't need all of this land to be fallow. I may want to actually put a forest, some of it. So the other part that was mentioned there briefly is we want to develop and refine this model where community groups care for their local forests. And I think Professor Kenny and another person had coined it neighborhoods approach, where you are tending for the trees and forest beside you. It's a natural place because you're out there walking through it, enjoying it anyway. Can you be part of a team that helps, actually helps report if there's something going on? Maybe there's an infestation. We've all, even just this year alone, we've seen these big winds taking out trees. We've now hitting a heat warnings in the city. What other challenges are we going to see, and how will our local forests handle them, and the newly planted forests specifically? So our mission is to make sure we get those newly planted sites to their free to grow stage, And that might mean tending them fairly closely for the first couple years and then being able to let them do their thing. But this lets us have a higher survival rate for the trees and not lose all of that effort that went into planting them in the first place, because suddenly a heat wave comes in and a whole lot of them perish because they haven't yet been able to establish their root system. And then finally, we have wonderful sponsors already for the tiny forest demonstration sites through Tree Canada and the Reactin organization helping sponsor some of it. We have the City of Ottawa sponsoring a little bit of it, but we still have a little ways to go to be able to fulfill the final pieces of that tiny forest. So we will do a little bit of fundraising to finish that work, hopefully this year and then early next spring. So that's really what we kind of hope to share today about the site. And I guess we'll pause and ask for questions and say thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, well, both of you, for this presentation. Maybe if you close the screen right now, we can just start with some of the questions. And I know I have a few, and I'm interested to know if anybody else does. They can always put them in the chat or request to unmute, and we can do it that way. But I'm just so fascinated because what you're doing has so many components to it. It's very systematic. It sort of seems that there's so many parts to having a healthy tree canopy in urban or semi-urban rural areas, well, or towns, small towns. And it just means that the seed stock, the public that needs to be inspired and motivated, and also just these, the access to the numbers of trees that we're talking about. So it seems like you put in a lot of thought in these various areas. But I'm just curious to know, and it is a not-for-profit organization, and I can understand the whole mission. Can you tell me a little bit more about the background of those involved? Because there's so many choices that you're making, so much research that you're doing, and you want to be understanding and measuring and looking at what the outcomes are. Right. And so how does that work within your team, and so what backgrounds do you have to be able to do that?
Did you want to kick at the can at this, Stephanie, or shall I?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I'll give it a start. So we actually recently remembered, because various of us came in at different stages, but the idea was born out of Tree Fest. A group of people had organized an Ottawa tree festival to just appreciate work that had been done and celebrate the fact that different groups within Ottawa were planting trees. And so a group started sitting around and musing about what's the next level? How do you take this a little bit further? So, forming a bit of a business or a nonprofit was definitely a key that helped unlock some of the challenges. Definitely the public landowners want to make sure that you're a reliable organization, you have insurance, you have a business plan, a board, that sort of stuff. So the mechanics of it kind of worked out that way. Shelley brings tremendous know-how and years of experience in food forestry. Andy Kenny brings a career in forestry from the University of Toronto, professor emeritus there. Phil McNeely brought a lot of political acumen, knowing who to contact, to open doors, to knock on doors, to make sure the idea was getting out there. And then I brought a bit of project management skills to it, to find out, to set some parameters for developing different sites, getting things through from idea to contract.
And of course, not just a bit of project management, a lot of project management. Very key to this whole system working.
And then I guess Shelley, connections, right? All of us bring a high degree of connections. I participate actively in my community association. I think the whole collection of board members have really strong ties to service groups or other volunteer groups. So it's really nice to look at the complementarity of making sure we can all reach out in different directions. And this year we did focus a little bit on post-secondary institutions, Les Cités Collégiales, Carleton University, U Ottawa. And I guess we don't have this mentality of working in silos. We kind of work with who we're with, and we're tremendously lucky to be, Shelley's Food Forest was already on site at Just Food, but Just Food is a tremendous partner to us in all of this. Shelley, maybe you want to say a little bit more about them, but I think that helps attract volunteers to us, cross-pollinate.
Yeah, I think maybe it would be worthwhile just this is a national audience, perhaps, for this type of recording. So yeah, we based in the National Capital Region. Maybe you want to explain a little bit, what is the National Capital Commission and why it is a federal agency that has all this land, and then Just Food, what is this farm, and how does that relate to your project specifically?
Well, I will say that the NCC is the largest landowner in our region. So I think it's at 26% of the land in this region is owned by them. So they were definitely someone we wanted to have a relationship with, because if you're setting your goal to be, I want a forest, 1,000 hectares of land, knowing the large landowners, City of Ottawa is another large landowner. We can also, talk to private landowners, but let's first line up the people who own the most land. The site itself, interestingly enough, the Just Food Community Farm is on the old NCC tree nursery property. So the entire farm itself, we're stewarding 9 acres, but the entire property is over 77 acres. And the nice thing about this means that there is a lot of really wonderful, fully grown trees at the site. So when we want to do tree seed collection forays in the spring or fall, we already have access to some wonderful, healthy native trees here, some really interesting species. But then having Just Food be a partner here also means that they have, I think it's around 15 partners on this site. We're one of them. So there are things happening on site that are really wonderful and interesting. A lot of communities that are maybe fled from other parts of the world are here on site growing food. They have communities doing therapy, nature therapy for people that are suffering and maybe need assistance from what is probably the best medicine, sitting in nature and just being or finding who you are. So we are very fortunate to be able to connect with all of them, and we have been finding all kinds of synergies. Nobody is against planting trees or growing food, so there's no real friction or resistance. But what there is here at this site for us is a lot of unique collaborations that we didn't suspect we never predicted we would have. For example, with Hidden Harvest and Just Food and some community food processing equipment, because if we wanted to convince private landowners to convert some of their cornfields into chestnut groves or walnut tree groves, so that they could potentially use that and grow food from that, they don't want to have to invest maybe in $100,000 worth of processing equipment. But what if we had it on site that people could come and use? So yeah, there's been a lot of really neat conversations and collaborations born out of this. And I think for other sites around Canada, there are these opportunities that might not all be centered on one piece of real estate, but certainly within communities and cities, having those networks and connecting to people, you immediately start to have ideas around how everyone can help each other on their shared goals. So,
well, and one other, when you were talking about, first of all, not having enough stock for trees, and so you have to go down the road of all of the seed saving and growing from seed, but also the tree rescue, and that can be adapted for any area. And so like,
Absolutely.
just if you model that and document what you're doing there and how you get people aware of that potential, and then who they would be. Is it mostly developers in the private sector or on these public lands when trees are there to be rescued and moved?
Yeah.
And that the whole process around that, that's very useful for any jurisdiction.
Yeah, and what we do hope that comes out of this, I think the whole board has this mission, is the piece about education and sharing. So being able to produce collateral that others can use. So if it is how to safely rescue a tree, what do they need? What do they like? If you are setting up a tree hub where you're temporarily having a space for these things, how do you set one up? What's the ideal way to care for it? What are the efficient ways to do it? I think that's kind of some of the output we hope to have from this work, and certainly from what we've already done. Also using data visualization and getting our information and data that we're gathering from year to year on survival rates and species types, getting those into formats that can be shared broadly. We have wonderful interns right now that are working on those pieces. So yeah. I'm excited to be able to get to the point where we can share more broadly.
Yeah, no, because there's a lot of learning and interest in this area, and yeah, we might as well not all do it from scratch, but it already sounds like if you're even looking at Scandinavia, or when you're talking, I was thinking of Brazil, of another, it's sort of a restoration project where, you know, land was so degraded, the water was gone, and so a lot of afforestation was happening in tree nursery on site, and bringing in students to help with that, bringing in young children to come and learn, in families, and processing the food, the apple cider in this case for you, but other products there. And it is similar. And so that's another project that is well documented and shared.
Oh,
Maybe
wonderful.
that was part of what one of you has already brought to the table for this project. But it's a lot of this sharing that is really important right now.
Yeah. Yeah, learn from others and grow. It's almost like the tiny forest model, but for people. The densely planted square meter where things are close together. When we start sharing ideas, we can grow faster.
And compete.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we've come to the end of the time that we allot for these webinars, but it was very, very interesting. I'm grateful that I even know the site and I've been there and really appreciate it. But the final thing that I'll say on behalf of Soul is that we're featuring you as like a 2021 Greener Greenspace recipient. We're happy to have toured your demonstration 4 fields, but we invite you and we encourage you to apply just for the renewal process, so that you're able to present some of what happened over the year and what you've learned and how that's impacted where you're going forward. So thank you both very much for coming today and sharing.
Thanks, Christine.
Presentation.
Thanks very much for having us. Great.
Okay. Thank you everybody for coming.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.